Wait, we can't use this. Oh no, the mouse is closing in. Star Wars. A franchise I hardly interact with anymore for a number of reasons. The inability to tell a coherent story in their flagship sequelogy gave me no hope. Plus, the casual disregard for decades of admittedly dumb lore has never sat right either. Especially when you're just gonna copy its homework with Clone Palpatine in the final movie of the Palpatine saga. Yeah, that's right. Those movies are about Palpatine. The Skywalkers are merely plot devices come to life. Fight me. But what really ground my gears was the loss of interesting characters in the wider universe that stemmed from various video games, like Kyle Katarn and Darth Revan, and one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise, Tiber Zann, the charismatic leader of the Zann Consortium, a faction invented for the Forces of Corruption expansion of Star Wars Empire at War. Buckle in, I'm going to spend a stupid amount of time talking about one of my favorite games. Released February 16th, 2006, Empire at War is the product of Petroglyph Games. While this was the studio's first game, it was by no means the first for a lot of these devs. Many are refugees from EA's shutdown of Westwood Studios, the original makers of Command & Conquer. More importantly, Westwood were the creators of the real-time strategy genre. Well, at least as we know it today. The evolution of RTS games could be a video unto itself, seeing as it took place over the course of a decade. Best to leave it at Dune 2 started what others have tried to perfect, including one of its lead designers and programmers, Petroglyph founder Joseph Bostic. A man who, alongside co-founders Stephen Tall and Michael Legg, lived through the golden age of RTS games and refused to let them die. Absolute legends. Star Wars Empire at War was officially announced in January of 2005, but the game's existence had been confirmed a few months prior by LucasArts president Jim Ward. We also know from an interview with Michael Legg that by release, Empire at War had been worked on for 2+ years. It had an original release date for the end of 2005 that would be pushed to that February 16th date I mentioned earlier. Due to the Star Wars branding, this is the exact opposite of a Ubisoft game. There is a wide breadth of interviews and preview content on the web, including a demo that was released a month before the game dropped. A demo I happened to come across as a child. It was then I knew I needed this game in my life. I resorted to begging my mom in the middle of EB Games, pulling the old switcheroo by showing her a game I knew she wouldn't let me buy before displaying Empire at War as the alternative. Shout out to Star Wars Galaxies for being the fall guy. Empire at War would release to generally positive reviews and sales were fairly strong. In fact, according to this press release, 6.7 million copies were sold by 2017. Not too shabby. The Forces of Corruption expansion would be announced in June of 2006 and released 4 months later. Forces of Corruption would add the Consortium, expand the existing factions, introduce various new mechanics, and include 12 new planets. Pretty much everything is sourced from the prequels, the expanded universe, and the mind of the mad genius who strapped a bomb to an Ewok. And our story only continues. In 2010, Star Wars Empire at War Gold Pack launched on Steam to basically no fanfare, but my appreciation since I had lost my discs by 2014. The next major event would be the death of GameSpy and the end of multiplayer in 2014. At least unless you're willing to use software like Hamachi to create a virtual LAN network to play with your friends. But man, yet another game on this channel affected by the greedy schmucks at Glue Mobile buying GameSpy to shut it down. Seriously, this is game number 5. This would thankfully be reversed with a major update in 2017. Not only was Steam multiplayer support being added, but so was an in-game mod selector with Steam Workshop support. See, Empire at War had gained a reputation over the years for its active modding community. This is due in part to how easy the game is to mod. From my understanding, the liberal use of XML data tables and the Lua scripting language are why. However the Magic Men make it work, it results in mods like Republic at War, Thrawn's Revenge, Rise of the Mandalorians, Awakening of the Rebellion, and so many more. Some of these mods are so big and expansive, they have their own dedicated sub-modding community. Empire at War has a wide range of near-professional quality mods that you can sink hundreds of hours into as a result. Especially since Petroglyph has continued to patch the game since 2017. It even made the news in 2023 because regular people were shocked that nerds were still obsessed with the Star Wars RTS. Hell, the game got another update in October while I was writing this video. If I haven't said it before, Petroglyph are legends who have helped keep the RTS genre alive in its darkest days. Their games might not always be the best, but the ideas remain innovative to this day. Now, visually, this is an RTS from 2006, and it looks the part. A few models have some, say, JPOG aesthetics, namely any unit that's not a vehicle or a starship, and those aren't free from their own issues like low-res textures. However, a lot of this is negated due to the very nature of the camera and the gameplay. You aren't going to be spending a lot, if any, time looking at these models up close and personal. Hell, the camera even has a super zoomed out mode so you can see larger portions of the battlefield. Plus, the rather stellar particle effects do wonders to distract from those issues. A lot of these explosion effects give me a warm feeling inside, and outside. Perhaps my favorite bit of detail is when ships in space explode apart. Their occupants spill into the void, giving you a very visceral sense that a lot of people suddenly cried out in terror and were silenced in the blink of an eye. Each faction is also distinct visually, allowing for easy identification while also serving to thematically describe the factions. Almost everything in the Empire is sterile white, gray, or black with no room for self-expression. Their structures also have a very brutalist look. The Rebellion, on the other hand, is bright and colorful, with almost no two units sharing the exact same color scheme. Their structures have an almost organic aesthetic that is very pleasing to the eye. Essentially the opposite of the Empire, where individualism is cranked to 11. The Consortium is right in the middle of the two. Due to the faction's very nature as a crime syndicate, there are a few similarities between units. This is contrasted with the imposing architecture that reminds rank and file who holds power in the organization. Perhaps the most interesting visual aspect is the cinematic camera. With a push of the button, the game will remove the HUD and adopt a letterbox format. The camera will then alternate between different shots for maximum cinematography. You can even manually change the scene by pressing the spacebar. Sadly, I don't use this feature very often. There's often too much going on for me to just sit back and watch units fight it out for a bit. The UI is my favorite visual element of the game as it is incredibly stylish. There's a freaking droid that is holographically displaying tooltip information. It's so cool! The overall structure stays the same between factions, but little details will change like button colors, droid models, and even the background for your unit cards. Units are even grouped together with like units, allowing for you to easily select all units of one type. And none of this is taking up a huge amount of screen real estate, allowing for a player to see lots of information while playing effectively. Simply S-tier UI design. The sounds of Empire at War are great. It uses some John Williams tracks, so I can't really play any in-game music for you, but I'm sure you can imagine the sad Tatooine music as I look out at the sunset. Ugh, I hate sand. That said, I have to give high praise to Frank Klepacki for not only composing the rest of the game's music, but for creating many of the game's sound effects and all of the UI sounds. From my understanding, he also had access to the Star Wars sound library. Hence, the sound work is authentically Star Wars to my ears, and that's all I really need to fulfill expectations. Actually sounding good is a bonus on top. The voice acting is also pretty good despite none of the original actors reprising their roles. I'm kinda surprised they didn't manage to get prolific voice actor Mark Hamill to voice Luke, but I assume there must have been some kind of scheduling issue. Those who are here do a fantastic job. like Steve Blum playing Stormtrooper number 4,
The power generator is down. Finish the rest of the rebels.
and Tenemura Morrison, Jango Fett's actor, voicing Boba Fett.
Is my target one of the filthy pirates in that sector?
And of course, the charismatic Tiber Zann, voiced by Jake Eberly, steals the show.
Jabba, how's the desert planet treating you? Dried up and died yet? No. Well, that's too bad. Now get out of my comm system.
His boisterous self is only contained by David Anthony Pizzuto's Uri Fenn.
I can sense the dark side of the Force within you. It has been a long time since I've had a challenging opponent. Do not disappoint me.
But really, presentation is secondary to how Empire at War plays. The gameplay is split between two major areas, the Galactic Map and the Battle Maps. We'll start with the Galactic Map since it's where the real meat of the game lies. Here you play as the leader of your faction, micromanaging day-to-day operations. This map plays out in real time, and at the end of each galactic day, a certain number of credits will be deposited into your account based on the planets you control. Credits are the one-size-fits-all spendable resource. They are used in constructing structures, building fleets, stealing your enemy's technological progress, hiring smugglers to siphon credits from your enemies, paying bounty hunters to off smugglers stealing your credits, training troops, and more. What is perhaps most interesting is that no two planets are alike. All planets have different amounts of building slots for structures and space station upgrades, not to mention an innate ability. For example, Bonthaweed will display nearby enemy fleet movements, ground bases are undetectable on Kashyyyk, training infantry on Kamino costs 1 credit due to the planet's cloning facilities, and Nal Huta's income will fluctuate due to the criminal nature of its economy, to name a few. Each planet is based off various systems from the movies and pre-Disney EU. All of the fan favorites are here. Coruscant, Naboo, Tatooine, Yavin 4, and more. Some planets will also have hyperlane routes between each other. These allow for quick travel across the galaxy. Additionally, controlling the world on either end will provide a credit boost due to increased trade. Each planet under your faction's control contributes to your faction's population cap. This can be further increased with space station construction. Most planets will also have native populations that will typically pick a side in a conflict. But speaking of, to start a conflict, you will have to train a suitable force. Each planet's training queue is limited to 5 space slots and 5 ground slots. This requires you to spread out your training facilities if you want to quickly replenish your forces. It's also best to build up garrisons to avoid losing strategic worlds, especially when particular units can only be built on specific planets and capital ship production is limited to like 8 planets total. Army assembled, the actual conquering of the planet takes place in 2 stages. You must first control the space above a planet in order to land troops on it. This leads us to the space battle map. Your fleet will jump into system on the opposite end of the map from the enemy space station. This space in between will be populated with various hazards and features. Asteroid fields will damage large ships, while small ones can sail through just fine. Nebulas can be used to hide units, but at the cost of being unable to use a unit's special ability while inside. Ion storms will deplete the shields of any ship that enters them. Try to avoid them. Additionally, on some maps there may be a sensor that unveils a large portion of the fog of war. The ships used in combat range in size from the smallest of fighters to Mon Calamari cruisers. Fighters are grouped into squadrons, while larger ships are standalone vessels to be controlled. Each ship has a different population cost, encouraging players to diversify their fleets to maximize the number of ships in active combat. While limited to a unit population of 25, reinforcements can drop in from hyperspace to replace those that have been lost. Which will be happening quite often, as space warfare makes World War II naval engagements look like children's slap fighting. These space battles, along with the fantastic Galactic Conquest mode, are the main reason why I keep coming back to this game over the years. Dropping a ship from hyperspace to counter a flanking maneuver never gets old. What makes these fights more engaging is how ships over a certain size have different targetable subsections. These are weapon systems, shield generators, engines, and the like. Destroying them prevents the usage of certain abilities. For example, destroying the engines of a ship prevents it from retreating in battle. This provides another layer of strategy to the space battles that I absolutely cannot get enough of. I could realistically spend the remaining runtime of this video just talking about how much I love these battles. The actual land invasions are another story. Once the space above a planet is under your control, you can safely bring your ground forces into orbit. Don't try sending a lot of transport ships into actively contested space. It doesn't end well. The ground combat is rather unique as it somewhat accurately simulates an invading force. As an invader, you control no buildings. Instead, to bring units into the fight, you must spawn them into drop zones. These are points on the map where transport ships will deliver your troops from orbit. It is important to note that drop zones can only be captured by infantry. Vehicles can't cap because it would be too easy to send speeders to all of them at once. Each drop zone is worth a different number of points, usually totaling up to 10. Unlike in space, each unit is broken down into several smaller squads of infantry or individual controllable vehicles. Further, in contrast to space battles, these whole units are worth a single population count. However, the total number of units that can be brought into battle is far less. This is in part a balancing feature, as any defender would only have the space on the planet for a maximum of 10 ground units plus garrison spawns from buildings. These garrisons will respawn each time they perish unless the building they spawn from is destroyed. That being said, the attacker has some advantages the defender won't, namely the ability to call in bombing runs and orbital strikes from the fleet in orbit. I love watching a creeping barrage wipe out an enemy position in the morning. If there are any natives on the planet, they will usually pick a side in the conflict. For example, the Geonosians will always fight for the rebellion. These units, like all natives, act as garrison troops with their own buildings that they spawn from when the last insect falls. These are of course just bugmen, so they can't take any damage without falling apart. However, their choice of weaponry is very effective against vehicles, causing me to recreate the battle in the Somme with Geonosians each time the planet is invaded, which results in a bit of cognitive dissonance due to the freedom fighters persona of the rebellion. The general rule for native populations is they are always weak, but a plentiful supplement to your existing force as a defender. As an invader, well, them homes are nice credit bonuses when burnt down. Having described them both, I personally find the ground combat to be the lesser part of the overall experience. It's fine in of itself, but it lacks the extra layer of strategic depth that exists in the space battles. Perhaps if there had been some kind of supply mechanic, or if all vehicles had targetable points, I would have been more intrigued. As it stands though, the space battles are triple S tier. Something of note as well for both battles is the ability to upgrade your units mid-fight. As a defender with access to structures, you can purchase upgrades that will apply to the current battle and all future battles in that system. This will of course cost credits, but these upgrades are often worth it in my opinion. 15% more damage is 15% more damage after all. Now that I've explained the basic mechanics, it's time to delve into the factions. With Forces of Corruption, there are 3 factions: Galactic Empire, Rebel Alliance, and the Zann Consortium. Each plays radically different from the others with their own sets of heroes, units, buildings, and even methods of research. Starting with the Empire, space fascists with drip. The Empire feels like a proper military when compared to the other factions. Their infantry looks organized, they have access to the largest ships in the game, and they have more heavy weaponry options than either of the other factions. Their ships have unique hangar hit points, providing most Empire ships with their own complement of fighters and bombers. In contrast, the other factions must build their own fighter-sized craft and manually add squadrons to fleets. The Empire's research is also fairly simple in comparison. Build a research facility, pay money, and wait for it to finish. It should be noted that the Empire is the main driver of research in Empire at War, but I'll expand on that in the other factions. As I mentioned earlier, each faction has a set of heroes with similar functions. Some, like General Veers, are purely ground-based units, while others like Admiral Thrawn are space only. But then you have some mad lads like Darth Vader who isn't above leaving the comfort of his Super Star Destroyer to kick some ass on the ground. If you build a training facility, you will have access to minor commanders for both land and space. But this all pales in comparison to the might of the Death Star. Yes, you can and will build the Death Star. It costs a shit ton of credits comparatively. There's a dedicated timer in the top left for all players to know when its construction will finish. When placed into a fleet, the fleet travel icon will change to the Death Star. If you invade a planet with this fleet, during the battle, a timer will appear at the top as the Death Star moves into position. You'll also notice a handy lever in your unit bar. It includes a button where the Death Star 2 can individually target capital ships for maximum damage. And once in position, the lever will turn green. Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station. With the nuking of a planet, only an asteroid field will remain. The base income will plummet, effectively reducing it to nothing more than somewhere to build an extra space station. This makes the Empire the most dangerous faction in the game. It has the ability to completely and irreversibly wipe out your economy. However, there are weaknesses to the Death Star. It can be destroyed in battle by the Rebellion if certain units are in the fleet and survive to the end of the battle. Otherwise, IG-88 knows the self-destruct codes for the station, providing the Consortium a way on the galactic map to deal with the problem. But we will get to them. Now it is time for the Revolution. The Rebel Alliance looks and plays the part of a ragtag group of freedom fighters. Hit and run tactics are baked into their mechanics. The Rebels have the ability to send land raids of 3 or few units to enemy planets, allowing you to cause well-coordinated havoc across the galaxy. I always found it to be very useful to scout a planet before a major invasion or as a distraction to my real plans. The Rebels are somewhat at a disadvantage in space due to the fact they don't have many large ships, the largest of which is Admiral Ackbar's Home 1. This is made up for by the plethora of fighter and corvette-sized ships. See, the smaller a ship is, the harder it is for larger ones to hit it. Meaning that a dense cloud of fighters and bombers stands a real chance at defeating an enemy space station or lone capital ship. As for research, well, the only way for the Rebels to gain better technology is to steal it from others. C-3PO and R2-D2 are sent behind enemy lines to nab the plans to vehicle factories, ship designs, turbo laser towers, and the like. Of course, you'll have to cough up credits to pay for the operation. Theft ain't free. The Rebels must steal all technology before being able to move on to the next level. And I'm fairly certain they also can't move on if the Empire hasn't increased its technological level. Don't quote me on this though. The Rebels are my least played faction, as I personally prefer the mechanics of the other factions. Speaking of, the Zann Consortium are perhaps the most interesting faction in Empire at War. On every civilized planet, there is a dark, seedy underbelly waiting to be corrupted. And that is where the Consortium thrives. While controlling planets is nice, corrupting them gives you benefits without the risks of ownership. Simply pull off a job. Racketeering, intimidation, Ewok slavery, and piracy are all methods which you may employ to achieve your goals. Train a defiler and set them loose on the galaxy. Although these missions will sometimes require specific heroes, units, or even other types of completed corruption missions to perform. When a world is corrupted, you will gain a portion of the income from said planet. Additionally, you'll be able to see any fleets and armies in system. Heck, pay a bribe and pass through systems you don't control outright. There's even the ability to sabotage buildings using a defiler on already corrupted planets. Certain heroes in the Rebellion and the Empire can remove this corruption for a price, and conquering a planet from its current owner will generally do the same. Research will also require corrupting planets. Certain worlds house black markets that provide new technologies, for a price. Additionally, Rebel and Empire-controlled worlds will offer different technologies, incentivizing you to have multiple black markets running. Plus, the only heroes who can make purchases on the black market are Tybrazon and Uri Fen. You may have noticed by now, but the Consortium rakes in cash. By the end of the Consortium campaign, I broke the credit counter. With a palace, the Consortium gains the equivalent of several spice mines in income for a single building. To balance this, everything that the Consortium can make or recruit is vastly more expensive. Losing a Death Stack fleet is now that much worse. You will also be constantly recruiting defilers at 1,000 credits a pop to recorrupt worlds. That in itself feels like a never-ending battle no matter which side of the law you exist on. With the factions gone over, let's talk game modes. Empire at War can be split between 3 different modes: the campaigns, Galactic Conquest, and Skirmish. I've pretty much described the entirety of the Galactic Conquest in trying to explain the mechanics outside the victory conditions. These are typically determined by which scenario you pick. Either destroy all enemy factions or specific heroes like the Emperor or Mon Mothma to win. Additionally, there are multiple options to tune the game to your liking, from difficulty to starting cash and research limits. The campaigns play out as a more structured version of Galactic Conquest. Many of the features remain, but there are now bespoke missions and a story. Completing missions will progressively unlock more of the galaxy to conquer, as well as introduce new heroes, units, and research levels. The Rebel campaign covers the events leading up to the Battle of Yavin 4, while the Empire campaign explores a what if the Death Star didn't explode scenario. Both of these are somewhat lackluster in comparison to the delight that is the Consortium campaign, but that's for Spoiler Town. skirmish matches play out similarly to those on the Galactic Conquest map with a few key differences. For starters, choose between a space, land, or land control battle. Don't ask me about the difference between those last two. Nearly 20 years later, and I still don't understand. You gain credits passively in these battles, but this rate can be increased by capturing various mining facilities. In space, you'll have control of an upgradable space station, while on the ground, you'll have a complete base from the start. These ground buildings can be destroyed, but repaired too. That way, the loss of a single building doesn't cost you a match. Research levels exist here too, and it costs a lot of credits to maintain a technological edge. Having laid out every mechanic and gushed over this game for like 20 minutes, we finally get to the part where I start talking some shit. And boy, do I have things to say about Empire at War. This was, and still is, a fairly buggy game. Case in point, this intimidation mission. Here I have to blow up some governor's house to convince him to take my bribe. Only, I've done that and he won't come out. Here's another example in the Rebel campaign. I wasn't paying attention and failed one of those proper missions by getting Han Solo and Chewbacca offed. Then I couldn't replay the mission because I couldn't actually get them to the planet. It was blued out because the two had apparently been smuggled there in a box in the first place. All in all, it effectively left my Rebel campaign dead in the water, so I moved on to others. These are seemingly script errors and not that big of a deal in the grand scheme. The soft crash that occurred when I tried to move units on a planet was something of a concern. Thankfully, it only happened once and I wasn't able to replicate it, but just know that this game's sheer complexity is working in and against its favor. And then there's basic mechanics like attack move that don't quite work how you would expect. In most other RTS games, this would involve a unit moving to a destination and stopping to fight anything along the way. Here in Empire at War, units will continue to travel to their destination, but they will also fight on the move. Maybe. Meaning that you have to be a bit more careful about your micro. All in all though, these are flaws I live with, as the very concept of the game is well executed more often than not. Oh, and as mentioned earlier, there is a multiplayer mode. I currently don't have anyone to test my skills against, but I have enjoyed playing skirmish matches and full galactic conquests against many friends and randoms in the past. The complexity of Empire at War combined with a human opponent makes for one of my favorite multiplayer experiences of all time. Alright, we've gotten to the part where I want to go in depth about the campaign for the Zann Consortium. If you don't want an 18-year-old RTS expansion campaign spoiled for you, now's the time to hop off. Because I'm going to tell you why Tiber Zann is the baddest motherfucker around. Our story begins with the tutorial for Forces of Corruption. This is one of those games where the events of the tutorial actually take place in the continuity of the campaign. Long ago, Tiber Zann was a rich boy who ran some illicit sabacc games while working for his family shipyard. His father didn't take kindly to this behavior and sent him off to the Imperial Academy to become an officer. While there, Zann expanded his criminal enterprises to include thrifting Imperial tech on the black market. Unfortunately, his activities were discovered and Zann was forced to resign from the Academy, saved by familial ties that have been fully broken. Now he's an associate of Jabba the Hutt, but their business relationship is going sour due to Jabba's acquisition of a very expensive artifact. Zann makes a play to steal the artifact from Jabba as he's attempting to sell it to the Empire on Felucia. Uri Fen, Zann's ever-trustworthy right hand, takes custody of the artifact while Zann provides the distraction for his escape, which results in prison time for Zann. An indeterminate amount of time later, and Zann is festering in the spice mines of Kessel. Despite Jabba's attempts, Zann has not disclosed the location of the artifact. With help from Uri, a prison riot, and two very familiar smugglers, Tiber Zann manages to escape the confines of Kessel. His first order of business is to rebuild the Consortium. His familia has fallen far in his absence. Only their base on Ryloth remains. But Tiber's return means the Zann Consortium is once again a name to be feared across the galaxy. Especially when the Empire and Rebels are too busy fighting each other to do anything. Zann has a very concrete goal in mind: access the Emperor's hidden vaults. Apparently a cellmate of Tiber's was an ex-Imperial officer who knew too much, but not enough to prevent Tiber from offing him. While it could be rumored, Zann has a feeling there's more to the story. Taking advantage of the recent destruction of the Death Star over Yavin 4, the Consortium scoured the wreckage for any information pertaining to the vaults. Upon examining the data, it turns out the vaults are very real indeed. Not only that, but there's also technical plans and a construction schedule for the Emperor's new flagship, the Eclipse. The ship is being built at Kuat, a place that the Emperor himself has visited quite often, leading Zann to believe that the information about those vaults will be found aboard that ship. But that's a long-term goal. With enough money flowing into the coffers again, the Consortium makes moves against Jabba's organization, wresting control of several planets including Hypori, home to a Clone Wars-era droidica factory. Seeing that he is outclassed, Jabba brokers a truce with Tiber to save his slimy yet leathery skin, allowing Tiber to focus on unlocking the secrets of the artifact, which it turns out is a creation of the Sith. Seeing as Darth Vader nor Darth Sidious would never assist the Consortium, Tiber is forced to look elsewhere for help, finding it in the form of the Night Sisters of Dathomir. These witches naturally align to the dark side of the Force due to its abundant presence on the planet. Unfortunately, the Emperor has found the planet first and forced its inhabitants into concentration camps for refusing to bend the knee. Upon freeing some Night Sisters, they point Tiber and Uri to the most powerful of their kind, Silvery. Their first meeting sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. Silvery tries taking control of Tiber's mind.
It is painful to see a trusted friend locked in this cell. You will open the door now.
Uri, if she tries that mind control trick again, shoot her.
Only to begin spewing murderous threats when Tiber's mind proves unshakable. Once she gets a look at that Sith artifact, she changes her tune quickly, ingratiating herself to Tiber in an attempt to study it. Her price is a ship off-world and the death of the Imperial Governor who locked her in a cage. Upon leaving Dathomir, Tiber is contacted by Grand Admiral Thrawn. For those who don't know, Thrawn is basically the Sun Tzu of the Star Wars universe. Not the kind of guy you want just calling you up randomly. The two trade barbs as only longtime rivals can. It makes me think that Thrawn might have had something to do with Tiber's demise in the Academy. Thrawn leaves Tiber with a warning. Stirring up too much shit with the Empire will bite you in the end. From this point on, Imperial forces will occasionally attack your worlds, attempting to conquer them. Sometime later, Silvery has completed her work translating the writing on the artifact. It is a Sith holocron containing an ancient star map, but one that covers territories that have been known for centuries. When Tiber muses about selling the holocron, Silvery is enraged at the idea. She clearly knows much more about it than she lets on, creating more friction between her and Tiber. Just then, Prince Shizor of the Black Sun Pirates contacts Zann. He offers to set up a meeting with the Emperor's representatives to sell the Sith holocron in exchange for carrying out a simple task: stealing a bunch of Tabana gas from the Cloud City refinery on Bespin. Both Tiber and Uri immediately smell a trap, especially since Bespin is under the direct control of Darth Vader. The boys decided to lay a trap of their own. All it takes is a little bit of falsification to point the theft directly towards Shizor. Considering Vader and Shizor have quite the history, it doesn't take long after for Vader to end his worthless existence. However, the scheduled meetup was a trap all along. Thrawn is waiting at the coordinates. Tiber's counterfeited evidence could convince Vader, but Thrawn saw right through the scheme. A hypervelocity gun destroys what appears to be Tiber's ship, only for him to drop out of hyperspace in his new flagship, the Merciless. The galactic heroes are thoroughly impressed with one another and order their fleets to attack. In the middle of the fighting, a bounty hunter named Bosk steals the Sith artifact and delivers it to Thrawn. This was completely unsurprising, as Bosk has already portrayed his former employer, Jabba the Hutt, for the promise of more credits. His greedy nature wouldn't let him miss such an opportunity, one that Tiber Zann was counting on. Much to Silvery's anger, Tiber wanted the artifact to be captured so he could track its location to the Emperor's personal vault on Coruscant, which also happens to be the place where the passkey for his new flagship is held. Unfortunately for her, in anger, Silvery revealed that there was in fact more to the Sith holocron than she let on. Now she fears what Vader and the Emperor would do with its power. Tiber, knowing that she had been lying, declares that if she lies to him again, he will travel to Dathomir and slaughter every last Night Sister on the planet. I assume he would also set Uri's blades upon her, something Uri has been desperate to do since meeting Silvery. With both Vader and the Emperor aboard the Death Star 2 over Endor, Tiber enlists Uri and Silvery to travel to Coruscant. There, while listening to jizz music in a bar, the group plans their heist of the vault. Things don't go according to plan when Silvery leaves her post and the Sith Adepts make their presence known, but they manage to escape with everything they set out to gather. Upon escaping, they learn that the Empire is actively falling apart. Both Vader and the Emperor are dead. The second Death Star is dust, and the rebellion is claiming victory. There is no better time to strike the Kuat shipyards than now. The Imperial remnants are regrouping there, pursued by Han Solo's forces. Once in system, Tiber forges an uneasy truce with Solo in order to clear a path to the Eclipse. Once under Consortium control, the rebels quickly turn on their former allies. While an incomplete ship, the super laser is functional enough to blast several ships to Kingdom Come Deliverance. Not even the arrival of another superstar destroyer can prevent total Consortium victory. In the aftermath of the Battle of Kuat, Tiber Zann examines his ill-gotten gains aboard the Eclipse. Billions of credits, hordes of technical data, and enough art to start multiple museum planets. While perfectly capable of starting a new galactic empire, Tiber is more than content to abandon the Eclipse and allow the rebels to create a new republic. Democracy will allow him to easily spread the Consortium to all corners of the galaxy. Besides, who doesn't like having a senator in their pocket? Just ask any Fortune 500 CEO. Meanwhile, Sillery uses the Sith holocron to travel to an unknown planet. She finds a vault filled with thousands of Sith soldiers frozen in carbonite, the perfect army to claim revenge upon Tiber Zann and his insolent threats. Thus, our story comes to a close with a threat of conflict on the horizon once more. A somber yet appropriate ending for the tale of a man whose ego rivals only the Emperor. In conclusion, I wasn't joking when I said I was going to spend a stupid amount of time talking about Empire at War. The sheer level of complexity and scope in the game mechanics is unrivaled when compared to contemporaries. Hell, I think there are a few modern games that can give this a run for its money. Not to mention the power of the Star Wars brand. I think it's why it managed to hold so much staying power decades later in the minds of nerds everywhere. And if you aren't satisfied with the content of the base game, dive right into the modding scene. You will absolutely find something that will entertain you for hours. You can find the gold pack version of the game that includes Empire at War and Forces of Corruption on Steam and GOG for $20, and it goes on sale fairly often. I highly recommend you grab this one if it is not already on your radar. Boy, with that wrapped up, I'm really not sure what to tackle next. I guess it's time I start taking some recommendations. Thanks for watching. More garbage to come.
McClunky.